Hi, and welcome to Mic Drop, Insights and Lessons from CI Thought Leaders. My name's Gary Cox. I'm your host, and I am super excited. I'm at LeanCon 2025. It's the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters event that they have every year. And one of the keynote speakers is Bob Emiliani. And I'm really excited. Thank you for taking the time.
My pleasure to be here with you today.
Yeah, this is really cool. It was really interesting. I was watching your presentation, and I'm going to start with that last line of that slide about Lean Six Sigma not being involved as a part of a management strategy. So help me out with that one.
Yeah, Lean has evolved over the years to be something closer to Toyota's management system, and then it's evolved into more like some tools, and then we have the problem of are the tools used correctly or incorrectly. In the old days, people were interested in transformation. Now, not so much. And so it's just kind of a confusing world with all these things going on. And it's also, people are very emotionally connected to different of these things. Lean Six Sigma, TPS, etc. I just prefer a sort of a cleaner view of what it is we need to do and how we need to do it.
So would you agree though that the tool set that's within the Lean Six Sigma toolbox is valuable?
Yeah, I mean, they can certainly be beneficial to an organization. There's no question about that. But the question then is, where do they want to go? And how quickly do they need to get there? And so in a competitive business environment, to me, hair on fire. It's an emergency. There's no birthright to existing as a business. You can go out of business in a blink of an eye. So there's the survival mentality, I think, needs to be more part of just everyday business thinking, that we might not exist in 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years. And therefore, we need to move quickly to learn these various things, apply them well, and so on, and grow and evolve into a direction that helps us ensure our survival. And along the way, as we heard from Yodo-san today, is develop people who are going to fill in when our time is up, in terms of we're going to retire at some point out of the business.
Well, and that brings me to another question. You know, the whole concept of my book and the channel is about developing people and mentoring and the respect. You talk a lot about that.
I do, and I kind of take a different perspective because my background is engineering. All my degrees are in engineering. And so I tend to look at things like, why aren't they working out as planned? So one of the things I've always been interested in is failure analysis as an engineer. And so I take that approach in the work I do with respect to leadership. Now, there's a lot of good leadership out there that's successful and so forth. And that's great. But it's hard to replicate. And so whether the leadership is successful and difficult to replicate, or whether leadership is bad and failing, I want to know why. And so I dig into those details. There's lots of people that talk about the positive aspects of leadership. And I'm one of those persons who doesn't like to follow the crowd. So if everybody's looking at X, I'll go look at Y.
Okay.
And that's a consistent pattern throughout my life, is to look at the kind of the opposite of what everybody else is focusing on.
I took a picture of that one slide, and I'll use that here. And that is that you have that equation where 3 + 4 equals, and then you got a blank spot, and then you've got 2 blank spots equals 7.
Yeah.
So which is really kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's experimenting. Yeah, trying different things, and just being not following the herd. And I don't mean to imply that that's necessarily a bad thing, because a lot of good stuff comes out of that environment of what people are trying to understand what constitutes success. And that's cool. But there needs to be a complementary, you have a positive charge and negative charge. So you need to balance between these two. And if it's all positive charge, it's not really realistic. There's the existence of negative charge, and we need to understand that and the interplay between the two.
Wow. Wow. That's really amazing. So where's AI fit for you in this whole idea of continuous improvement? Lean?
I think we're very much in an interregnum, between phases here of a lot of people and some robotics and automation and software that we've seen since the 1960s with the IBM 360 computer or so forth, leading through to today. But definitely we're headed into a world with AI and additional robotic automation and so forth. And the concern, of course, is, when does things really flip into more AI and robotics than people? and it could be coming quickly. Hyodo-san mentioned, we're still going to be dealing with the people in business, a lot of people in business for the next 10, 15 years. I thought his time frame was interesting, 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
So what do we do in year 16 or 20, whatever
Right.
the case may be? Because there is business leaders have always been interested in investing in technology, and it is primarily to replace people. Yes, there's quality improvement and some other improvements that come with that, lead time reduction and so forth. But throughout the history of technology, and even going back to ancient times, technology meant fewer people. The leaders were like all in for that. So that's going to continue. I don't see anything stopping that unless there's a political intervention of some sort. And so they're going to continue to look towards the nirvana of maximum technology, minimum people. And from a leadership perspective of primarily bigger companies, but even smaller companies have their challenges in managing a workforce. So they're going to follow the leader to some extent, greater or lesser extents, where the leader's attitude is, maximum technology, minimum people. And so how does Lean, TPS, any of this fit in? We'll see. Yeah. It's hard to say. I think there's a case to be made that technology will just sort of push it aside. You're seeing phrases like digital lean today, but a lot of times people join things together, digital and lean, in this interregnum period before they drop the lean and go to digital. I'm not saying that'll happen, but for example, could happen. So I don't know where it'll go. Then the other thing too is, let's say it does go maximum technology, minimum people. Well, a lot of times folks overshoot. And so maybe after messing around with that scenario for 10 or 15, 20 years, people said, maybe we need less technology and more people. So this situation could reverse in the year 2050, let's say.
Wow.
Who knows?
Yeah. Imagine that.
Yeah.
Can't even think about that.
Yeah, a little bit of whiplash
A
there.
little bit. So, think about machines do what machines do because they're instructed by people to do what they do.
Yeah.
When people work, they're connected to a purpose, right? And they get meaning out of their work. That is a tangible piece of what they do. When I think about the leadership element in the training and the mentoring and the coaching, I'm always trying to focus on how that person finds value and meaning out of what they're doing, whether it's working on the front line, whether it's leadership, whether it's at a strategic table, whatever that is. Do you think that's going to get lost in the future?
I mean, who can predict the future?
Yeah, no, true.
It'll change. I mean,
but you've got an extensive history. I mean, you've got a long career. You've had a long career. You're the author of 28 books on the subject of continuous improvement, leadership, lean, and so on. Are you seeing that? Has that not changed? Has everything else changed around that whole idea of purpose for people and so on?
It's hard to separate the so-called lip service, the reality, what's really happening compared to what people say. And there's a proverbial gap between, the plan and actual in this. And so the plan is to take this stuff seriously and so forth, but the actual on the ground, employees will have a lot of complaints about this, that they're not fulfilled and so forth. And you see the surveys, there's a lot of, concern about leadership. People very dissatisfied. I mean, somewhat to vary, whatever the survey says, but there's a fair amount of dissatisfaction. And so, yeah, there's room for improvement, that's for sure.
I think that dissatisfaction or that unfulfillment potentially comes from the fact is that there's a fear factor associated with AI that's at play. And, even today, you don't have to be watching the news very, very much to know that certainly in the United States, where you're from, there's a fear factor about job loss and so on.
Absolutely, and some countries are more aggressive in that regard in terms of maximum technology, minimum people than others. And so some countries will sort of pave the road in terms of that's a great idea or that's a huge mistake or whatever in between, and time will tell. I mean, I do think it's important to try to game out what are the possible outcomes and possible distress that might occur.
So what do you think, if you were going to give advice to a new business or a business who's looking to get into the continuous improvement, lean thinking, just doing things better today than yesterday, what would be your recommended approach?
So you mean if somebody's going to leave the company and be a consultant, something like that?
Yeah, exactly.
No, that's okay. I would say that from my view, and my view is not perfect, and I'm not all knowing, but from what I see, it's a crowded market for those kind of services and related products. And so I would, if I was going to do that kind of work, and I don't, but if I was, I'd try to find a niche, something that's different than what everybody else does. And pursuant to what I said earlier, I try to find out people are doing X, I'll go do Y, but there may be no market for Y.
Exactly.
X may be the sort of sweet spot. So you might join a crowded market, and then you have some, the customer would have pricing power because there's lots of choice of who to select. So it's basically a buyer's market for that kind of service. So I would try to find a way to make it more of a seller's market. I've got something unique and that hopefully people want. And so you can get a good price for your services. So I think that they have, to be an entrepreneur in this space requires some clear thought, and also to recognize that you may have somebody may have some idealistic notion of lean transformation. This was a popular phrase for 20 years, starting in the late 80s. And but the reality is the market doesn't want that. They want lean tools. And so you're going to have to adjust your idealism to the reality of you're cut loose from your company, and now you have to make an income on your own. And so you have to be sensitive to what the market is really interested in. And that requires, you would know this better than I, careful listening, careful observation, feedback, and so on, to make sure that you are satisfying the customer need.
Wow, that's great stuff. So you've got a newsletter and you got a website, and tell everybody a little bit about that,
so
we can connect with you.
Sure. So you'll find me on LinkedIn, and I post a lot of, I guess, non-conventional perspective on things, and somewhat controversial at times, which my whole purpose is basically to get people to think more broadly.
I like it. I do.
It's just rather than being in the bubble. And in lean world, Six Sigma world, et cetera, people tend to be in bubbles, tend to, not, totally. But I want to try to add something in there to kind of break the bubble and see things from a different perspective. So you'll find me on LinkedIn. I have a website, bobemiliani.com. Who doesn't have a website? But anyway, and so there you'll find information about my books, and there's a blog, and I've moved over to subscription model for a few things, and it's just given with AI out there and things like that, snooping and capturing all of my stuff, it's like I wanted to kind of get out of that potential problem.
Good point.
But I try to write. I'm still active in writing, just not books. I'm giving up on that just enough. 28 enough. But the
wouldn't
blog,
go to 30. I would have thought 30 would have been a number. But anyway,
the blog is very active, and
which is good.
I'm doing sort of non-traditional perspectives on what's going on there.
Yeah. So. No, and I think that you talk about that niche space, that's certainly yours.
So. Yeah, and I think people got to understand too, though, that I'm not. I've always had a full-time job. I've never done this as like my sole source of income and survival. So oftentimes somebody says to me, this post on LinkedIn you're doing a lousy job of marketing yourself. And I say to them, what makes you think I'm marketing myself?
Exactly, right.
I mean, I'm not doing what you're doing. I respect what you're doing, but I'm not doing what you're doing. I'm doing something different. Somebody once asked me, what's your business plan? I go, what business plan?
That's it. You don't need a business plan. No, exactly.
For what I'm doing, it's it's different.
Well, thanks for taking time from LeanCon for this chat, and I've got a lot of respect for what you do and how you do it. And
thank you so much.
Thanks.
My
really
pleasure.
Appreciate it.